Christos Vostras. Christos Anest. So this week we conclude the short series of sermons that have been about the sacrament of confession. And last week, and I apologize I don't have a nice infographic this week to draw out for people, but this week we conclude from what we had brought last week. That last week we talked about exactly figuring out what a sin is, how to determine that in our lives. And so this week I wanted to go over just the more general guidelines to what a confession should be, how to quote unquote give a good one. Because again, there's no grade for confession. There's no ultimate checklist that you have to match up to. It's if you feel as though you have reconciled yourself to it. And so these are the things that I want to offer to you that can help you in that endeavor. So after you've gone and figured out exactly where you've sinned, exactly where you have had your shortcomings, as we discussed last week, where you sort of have crossed the line, when you've decided that it's time to come for confession, that decision should be based on you and you alone. Not a specific time of the year in which confessions are normal, not somebody else prompting you saying, I think you really should go, but you, yourself, deciding this is what I need. And as a general rule of thumb, the best way to go is 4 times a year. We have 4 great fasting seasons in the church, and so if you need a distinctive way to measure your time, do that. Once per fasting season. Lent, Nativity, the Apostles' Fast, and the Dormition Fast. They're pretty well spaced too. But, as Bishop Gregory says to all of his youth at Camp Nazareth, confession is the place to dump your garbage, to get it all off of your chest. So when you feel as though you're just overburdened, that's the time. It doesn't matter if there are still 3 months until Lent, or if there's 2 weeks until Nativity. If you feel burdened, that's the time when you have to reconcile in yourself and say, maybe it's time that I go. Maybe now's the time that I try to bring all this to God. And to sort of carry on with that, this whole dumping off of our garbage doesn't have to be our sins. It could just be things that are bothering us. Things that we need, like that open channel to be able to just sort of lay into God's hands. Because admittedly, human as we all are, there are things that we can't handle. Myself included. And the best way to do that is to just sort of offer it to God, say, here, this is what I have, please help me. It's not a sin, I haven't done anything wrong in this regard, just please help me carry this. And that's why Christ told us that we can take on his burden. He even said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And he's not telling us, well, you have to deal with your own sins and also take on my burden. He's telling us that we can trade. That he'll take on all the stuff that we can't handle. That he'll carry everything that is too weighty for us. And we get to carry his burden. That is far easier. That is much, much lighter. Something that we can handle. Because he's guaranteed that we're able to handle it. And then when we get to confession, the sort of best practices that we can sort of go about are when we're sort of fessing up, so to speak, to our own sins, to make sure that they remain about us. It's really easy because our lives are complicated. A lot of the things that we encounter are not, I'll put it this way, it's one way I learned a while ago. They're not waffles, they're spaghetti. You know, if you pour syrup on waffles, they fit into nice little compartments, right? They all have little squares. It flows evenly, everything's filled, it's great. But most of our lives are like spaghetti. If you pour sauce on it, there are noodles touching everything else. There's sauce that gets everywhere. There's no way to figure out where one strand begins and another ends. And that's much like our lives. And so we have this tendency as humans, when we're sort of admitting what we've done wrong or trying to reconcile something, we start to bring in everybody else who might have been connected to that. So it wasn't just me that did this particular sin. I did this sin, and also this person sinned with me, and this person made us both sin, and so I'm not entirely to blame, God. yes, I sinned, but those people need to be dragged down with me. And that's something that we should avoid in confession. It's about us, ourselves, and God alone. And if there are other people that we know of who, say we were all in a group and all of us as the church murdered someone. Yes, we're all guilty, but it's only on each individual to come and confess that. Doesn't matter how many other of us know that we've committed them. It's on every individual to bring that to God. And then it sort of ties in with this first one that we like to tend to justify ourselves. If you can remember being a young child and sort of your parents confront you about some wrongdoing you've done, and then you start to bring it back to them like, yeah, I did this thing, but. There's always that but on the end that makes us less guilty. Yes, I did something wrong, but it's okay that I did this. I sinned, but it was to do something good. The ends justify the means. And again, that's something that we should try to work and avoid in confession. That it doesn't matter whether we've sinned in a righteous way or an unrighteous way. We sin. We bring that to God, and that's for Him to decide. And it's for us to unburden ourselves of that. And we sort of worry about this justification because we don't want to be judged. We want to make sure that, yeah, we sin, but we're still in the right because it hurts. It hurts to admit everything that we've done. But I promise you that if we avoid that, we feel better towards the end. That it doesn't matter what we've done, it matters that we've admitted it and asked for forgiveness. St. Paul even tells us that, say we were to commit a sin for the greater good, that you have to sin in order to do something better. And St. Paul tells us that the entire situation is now worthless. Because nothing good begins with sin. And I like to bring up, as I told not my Sunday school students here, but elsewhere at the cathedral, the most popular conundrum that this could be related to. If you've ever heard somebody ask, well, you're a good person, so if you had the chance and you went back in time, would you kill Hitler before he did what he did? It's a common philosophical conundrum. Would you stop somebody evil? But the question is, how would you do that? Most people are like, oh yeah, I'd kill Hitler before I did everything. But if we look at the way that Orthodox Christianity faces up to this problem, nothing good begins with sin. You are not justified in killing Hitler because it was wrong. That's not what God wanted. It is not in our human nature to be allowed to hurt each other. And so that's what we have to sort of parse down into all of our own sinfulness. Yes, we were angry. Yes, we lied. Yes, we were jealous. And that's it. We did the thing, and it's cut and dry. And it's hard. The same as last week. It's hard to figure out where we've sinned, and we have to do that ourselves. And in the same way, it's hard to come to confession and think about sort of bringing that all to God and not want to be justified. Not want to say, well, God, yes, I did these things, but please make it okay because I hope for the best. Because other people did it too. And the last thing I wanted to bring up in confession, if we can think back to the beginning of Lent. We hear about the publican and the Pharisee. And the reason that we hear this at the beginning of Lent is because this very important thing expresses to us one major problem when coming to confession. That if I have done something good, I also sort of try to balance the scales in confession. Yes, God, I've sinned, but I also did this really great thing. Yes, God, I lied, but I also gave to charity. Or I'm a really good person. I'm always nice to everybody. I helped out this person. And we sort of try to balance that out so that it doesn't weigh on us so much. We have good to outweigh our bad. But the important thing to remember is that God already knows everything we've done. God already has seen our sins, and He's seen our triumphs and our virtues. And the important thing to recognize is that when we sort of bring that back, we're not pulling a fast one on God. He knows what we're playing. The important thing is that we're coming to Him just to say, I admit where I've done wrong. Please help me. Not, I admit where I've done wrong, and I also admit where I've done good. So maybe I've broken even. I don't need your help, God. We're there for one reason and one reason only. With the intent of returning to absolute purity. And I'll close by reminding you of what I brought up in the first of this short series. The confession and the point of it is returning to baptismal purity. And what that means is that when we are baptized, we are made new. When we are baptized, we are dunked in the tank 3 times, so to speak. And each of those 3 times, it represents a day in which Christ was dead and ended too. And after the 3rd time that we rise from that, we have died and been resurrected in Christ. We are not the same person we were before. We are something new. And after baptism is done, after we've been chrismated, we'll put on a white robe is put on us. And it represents that purity and that newness that we've attained. And if any of you really pay attention to the robes that I wear, in every priest's vestments, they wear white robes underneath everything. And it's the first thing that I have to put on when I'm vested. And I say, my soul shall rejoice in the Lord, for He has clothed me with the garment of salvation, and with a robe of joy He has covered me. We say the same prayers as we're sort of adorning a baby, or an adult, doesn't matter. But when we give them that white garment, that point is that it represents the purity that we all hope for. And when we come to confession, we're not earning ourselves a 1 communion ticket. We're not earning ourselves any sort of medals or accolades. We are trying to take ourselves back to that absolute purity. That all the stain of sin that sort of gets on us over time is removed, and we are back to absolute perfection in the eyes of God. And then we do it all over again. And we try to get better each and every time. Slowly but surely. And so take all of this and know that, again, I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad for any confessions they may have given. I'm doing this to teach, to try to help us all get closer to that kingdom. And so I pray that this not only fill your minds but your hearts. And in the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. Christ is risen.